They say kindness always returns to you, but my truth is, sometimes kindness is mistaken for weakness until you prove otherwise. I'm Eleanor Harris, born in 1956 in Hobart, Tasmania. Back in my late 60s, after my knee replacement surgery, the people I loved most turned their backs on me. I felt broken, discarded, and betrayed, but then something happened that changed everything. Today, at 68, sitting in my quiet flat in Melbourne, I'm finally sharing this because silence never heals wounds, it only feeds them. If you're listening, drop your city below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I had worked as a nurse for over 40 years, pouring myself into a job that demanded sleepless nights, sore feet, and the patience of a saint. I raised my only daughter, Clara, mostly alone after my husband passed when she was in her teens. I wanted her to have a stable future, so I sacrificed holidays, friendships, even my health, to put her through private school and later support her when she chose to study law. When she married Martin, I thought my sacrifices had finally bloomed into something beautiful. I gave them the down payment for their house in the suburbs of Melbourne, co-signed the mortgage, and even dipped into my retirement savings when they said Martin's business needed a little push. I thought I was investing in family and love, in the circle of giving and receiving. But surgery has a way of showing you who really stands beside you. The operation on my knee was necessary. Years of long hospital shifts and arthritis had worn it down to the bone. When the doctor discharged me, I assumed Clara and Martin would be there to support me during recovery. After all, hadn't I always been there for them? Instead, what I heard still stings like salt rubbed into a fresh wound. It was only 2 weeks after I moved into their guest room that I overheard the words. Clara thought I was asleep, but I heard her sharp whisper drift through the thin walls. "We're not her nurses, Martin." I didn't sign up to babysit my own mother. My heart dropped, and before I could even process the pain, Martin's voice followed, colder, harder. "She's becoming a burden. She should have sorted out care for herself instead of dumping it on us." I lay there staring at the ceiling, every syllable carving deep into me. For decades, I had been their safety net, their lender, their rescuer. And now, when my body finally failed me, I was reduced to a nuisance in their eyes. The days that followed were brutal. Meals were scarce. Sometimes they didn't bother to cook, leaving me to hobble around with my crutches just to make toast. Appointments were missed because Clara was too busy or Martin had meetings. The medicine I needed after surgery sat forgotten on the counter until I reminded them. When I asked for help bathing, Clara's irritation was barely masked. "Mom, I have a job. I can't be running around after you." The humiliation of hearing my own daughter sigh because I asked for a glass of water was worse than the physical pain. I started feeling like a stranger in the very house my money had helped them keep. My grandson, Felix, only 7, would sometimes sneak into my room with a biscuit or a glass of juice. His small kindnesses were the only warmth I felt in that cold household. One night, when the pain in my knee throbbed so badly that tears stained my pillow, I decided to get up for some ice. On my way down the hall, I heard them again, this time laughing bitterly in the kitchen. Martin's words made my stomach twist. "We could have had a tenant paying us rent instead of her lying around, and she doesn't even realize we're behind on the mortgage. What's she good for?" Clara chuckled, replying, "Well, at least she won't be around forever." I froze. Not only did they resent caring for me, they were mismanaging the very money I had poured into that house. The betrayal doubled in weight. My body felt weak, but my mind sharpened in that moment. Something inside me stirred, something I had long buried under years of giving too much. The instinct to protect myself. But at that time, I was still dependent, still healing. My knee was swollen, my steps wobbly, and I knew if I lashed out too soon, they'd twist it against me, so I played small. I bit my tongue, observed, and took note. I pretended not to overhear when they complained about my taking up space. I smiled faintly when Clara rolled her eyes at me. Inside, though, I was quietly collecting every piece of evidence, every word, every sign. The lowest point came when I fell trying to get to the bathroom. I cried out in pain, and Martin came rushing. But instead of helping, he barked. "What the hell, Eleanor? You're going to ruin the carpet." Clara joined in, arms folded, glaring down at me. "Mom, this can't go on. You're making everything harder for us." Lying there on the cold tiles, I realized they didn't see me as a mother, as family, as someone who had poured her life into theirs. They saw me as weight, as inconvenience. That night, while nursing my swollen knee in silence, I made myself a promise. If they thought I was weak, if they thought they could use me, discard me, and laugh behind my back, they were mistaken. They didn't know that even a wounded lioness has claws. I began to quietly plan the steps that would change everything, though. Morning after that brutal fall, I woke up with a different fire in my chest. The pain in my knee was still there, yes, but it wasn't the sharpest ache anymore. The sharper one was betrayal, and it hardened into resolve. For too long, I had played the role of the dependable mother, the rescuer who always came through. Now I finally saw what that had made me in Clara and Martin's eyes, a doormat. But I wasn't going to stay there. The first thing I did was call my bank. My hands trembled as I dialed, whispering quietly from the guest room so they wouldn't. "Over here. Yes, this is Eleanor Harris. I'd like to freeze all joint access to my accounts." The officer confirmed my request, and just like that, the financial leash I had unknowingly handed them was snapped back into my own hands. By the time Clara discovered the block on the credit card, her fury was volcanic. She stormed into my room, eyes flashing. "Mom, why on earth is the account frozen?" I had groceries to pay for. I looked at her steadily, my voice calm. "Groceries? Or was it Martin's business bills again? Don't lie to me, Clara." Her jaw clenched, and she muttered something about needing space before slamming the door. Within hours, Martin confronted me, his voice slick with false charm. "Eleanor, I think there's been some mistake. We can't manage the house without access to those funds." I didn't flinch. "Martin, I'm not your bank. I helped you because I trusted you." That trust is gone. From that day forward, the air in the house shifted. Clara and Martin no longer tried to mask their disdain. They snapped at me for the smallest things. They left me waiting for meals. Martin even accused me of making Clara sick with stress, but the more they tried to pressure me, the clearer my path became. I rang Vivian, an old colleague from my nursing days, who lived across the city. She was shocked when I told her everything. "Ellie, you can't stay there another day," she urged. "Come stay with me. We'll figure this out together." My eyes filled with tears. Just hearing someone call me Ellie with warmth reminded me of who I had been before I let my daughter's entitlement shrink me. But leaving wasn't simple. I needed time to heal, and Clara still had legal ties to me through the mortgage. I didn't want them to sense I was planning an exit, so I stayed watchful. I began documenting things, dates when my medication was skipped, the remarks they made, the way Martin talked about the mortgage being our house even though my name was on the deed. The boiling point came when they tried to corner me legally. Clara arranged a doctor's appointment without telling me the full truth. When we arrived, I realized she had dragged me to a psychiatrist. The man asked a series of loaded questions about my memory, my mood, and my finances. My daughter sat there with her polished liar's smile as if this was all in my best interest, but I wasn't the fragile, confused old woman she hoped I'd be. I answered with clarity, even humor. When the doctor asked if I knew the date and where I was, I chuckled. "It's the 14th of May. I'm in Melbourne, and my daughter is trying to have me declared incompetent. Do you need me to recite the alphabet backwards as well?" His eyebrows shot up. Clara flushed crimson. By the end of the session, the doctor assured me privately that I had nothing to worry about. That was the day I called James Whitaker, a lawyer recommended by Vivian. James was younger, sharp-eyed, and listened intently as I told him everything from the mortgage to the financial manipulation to their attempts at declaring me unfit. He leaned forward, voice steady. "Eleanor, you have more power than you think. Legally, that house is half yours. You can evict them." The idea hit me like a thunderclap. Evict my own daughter. It sounded cruel, almost unthinkable. But then I remembered Clara's words were not her nurses and Martin's cold laugh about tenants being more useful than me. They had treated me like a tenant in my own investment. Why should I protect them from consequences they had earned? With James's help, I initiated proceedings. Quietly, discreetly, while still recovering in their home, when Clara and Martin finally received notice, the explosion rattled the walls. Clara burst into my room, screaming, "How dare you? After everything I've done for you." I sat upright, my crutch leaning against the bed. "Everything you've done for me. Clara, I carried you through life. I bled my savings for you. And when I needed you most, you turned me into a burden." Enough is enough. Martin was less dramatic, but his eyes were filled with venom. "You'll regret this, Eleanor. You can't survive without us." I met his glare head on. "That's what you want to believe. But you'll see how wrong you are." The weeks that followed were war. They tried guilt, gaslighting, and even parading Felix in front of me, saying, "Do you really want to break up this family?" That was the hardest part, seeing my grandson caught in the crossfire. I loved that boy more than life itself. But I also knew that if I allowed myself to cave for his sake, Clara and Martin would never stop exploiting me, and in the long run, Felix deserved a grandmother who stood tall, not one who allowed herself to be trampled. With Vivian's support, I moved into her spare room temporarily. For the first time in months, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee and kindness instead of hostility. My body still ached, but my spirit lifted. Together with James, I began piecing back the life Clara and Martin had tried to dismantle. I regained control of my accounts, secured my legal standing, and planned a future that no longer relied on their approval. By the time the eviction date loomed, Clara and Martin's panic was almost pitiable. They begged, pleaded, even promised to change, but it was all hollow. I had seen their true faces, and there was no unseeing them. The day they packed their things and left, Clara wouldn't even look at me. Martin muttered curses under his breath. Felix hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'll miss you, Nana." I kissed his hair, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. "You'll always have me, Felix, always." When the door shut behind them, silence filled the house, not the heavy, cruel silence of being unwanted, but the liberating kind, the kind that lets you breathe. For the first time in years, the home I had invested in finally felt like mine. And though I knew the storm wasn't over, I also knew I had taken back the steering wheel of my own life. No longer a victim, no longer a pawn, just Eleanor stronger than they ever imagined. The house was mine again, but I no longer saw it as a sanctuary. Too many ghosts of whispered insults clung to those walls, so I sold it. With James guiding me, the transaction was swift and clean, and the funds flowed directly into an account only I controlled. Clara and Martin had assumed for years that I'd leave the property to them outright, that all my sacrifices were simply down payments on their comfort. But now, watching the sale finalize, I realized those assumptions had been nothing but chains. Breaking them was freedom. I moved into a modest flat in Melbourne, not far from the hospital where I had worked most of my life. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and it was filled with sunlight and peace. Vivian helped me unpack, laughing as we placed my old nursing medals on a shelf. "Ellie, I haven't seen you smile like this in years," she said. She was right. I felt lighter, as if reclaiming my space had reclaimed me. But Clara and Martin weren't done. They tried one last desperate move, filing a claim that I was mentally unfit to handle my finances. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so cruel. James represented me fiercely. In court, Clara's lawyer laid out their case. But when the judge asked me direct questions, my answers were steady, clear, and sharp as glass. I explained every account, every transaction, and detailed the steps I had taken to secure my future. The judge dismissed their petition on the spot. Clara's face drained of color. Martin's lips tightened in rage. I walked out taller than I had in decades. That victory gave me the courage to do something I had been considering quietly: rewrite my will. For years, Clara had been the sole heir to everything I owned. But that cycle of enabling was over. Instead, I left a portion in trust for Felix, with strict conditions ensuring Martin and Clara couldn't touch it. The rest I directed into a nursing scholarship at the very hospital where I'd spent my career. I wanted young nurses, who often worked thankless shifts like I had, to feel the support I once wished for. My lawyer called it bold. To me, it was justice. When I finally told Clara, the fury in her voice was volcanic. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" She shrieked over the phone. I took a deep breath before answering. "Clara, I did it because I love you. Love doesn't mean funding your mistakes. Love means teaching you to stand without leaning on me until I collapse." There was silence on the line, followed by a click. She hasn't called since, but while my relationship with Clara crumbled, my life began to bloom. I accepted a part-time role as a patient advocate at the hospital, sitting with patients before operations, guiding their families through recovery. I felt a deep sense of purpose return. I wasn't just surviving, I was giving again, but this time on my own terms. My colleagues, old and new, treated me with respect that reminded me of who I truly was, not a burden, not a bank, but a woman of worth. Felix remained my lifeline. Clara tried to restrict his visits, but Martin's sister, who saw through their games, often brought him to me. Those weekends were filled with Lego castles, pancake breakfasts, and his giggles echoing through my little flat. One evening, as we sat watching a cartoon, he turned to me and said, "Nana, you're the strongest person I know." Tears filled my eyes. That simple sentence erased years of doubt. As months passed, Clara and Martin's worlds seemed to falter. Their mortgage troubles deepened without my constant bailouts. Martin's business floundered, and whispers reached me through mutual acquaintances about their fights, their debts, their unraveling. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Life was teaching them lessons far harsher than any words I could deliver. One day, unexpectedly, Clara showed up at my door. She looked tired, her usual polished veneer cracked. For a moment, my heart leapt, hoping she had come to apologize. Instead, she asked in a flat tone, "Are you happy now, Mom?" "You've ruined us." I steadied myself. "No, Clara, you ruined yourselves when you chose greed over gratitude." I simply stepped out of the way. Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned and walked away. I haven't seen her since. It hurts. Yes. A mother's heart never stops aching for her child. No matter how broken the bond. But I also understood something vital. Peace sometimes means letting go of those who refuse to respect you. Love doesn't always heal. It sometimes liberates. Now, at 68, my life feels fuller than I imagined. My days are woven with work. I love friendships that sustain me, and moments of laughter with Felix. At night, I sit on my balcony, watching the city lights shimmer, and I feel no bitterness. Only relief, only strength. I share this story not for pity, but for anyone who has felt crushed by a family's betrayal. You are not alone, and you are not powerless, no matter your age. If I could reclaim my life after decades of giving too much, so can you. Moral lesson: even when family wounds you, reclaiming dignity restores peace. Never fear setting boundaries, for strength and self-respect will always rewrite your story. If this touched you, like the video, subscribe for more stories, share it with friends, and comment your lesson.